Okay, let's continue on with the next part here, the spheres of influence. When you think about leadership as influence versus leadership as simply position, you realize that people can exert leadership in a number of different directions. So biblical example, Moses influencing people under him, Barnabas influencing his peers. Daniel had the privilege of influencing people over him. You might say that about Moses too. And Nehemiah influencing all three. There are different ways to lead. We talked about leading by example, leading by position, leading by relating, and leading by speaking or writing. Most of the people who are good authors, often they're not very good writers, and they're not in charge of large groups of people, but yet they're leaders because they're very influential with their writings. What does leadership develop? One is godly character, spiritual formation. The course that we'll be teaching in September is going to be spiritual formations for Christian leaders. One of the underlying philosophies that Jay Diller and I have of leadership is that it is primarily a heart-shaping activity by God. And when that heart-shaping activity is done, He will accomplish His purposes through a leader. When you think about Moses, born with all that privilege and all the titles and all the riches and all the wealth, what did God do with them? Threw him out in the wilderness because there were heart-shaping things that needed to be done. And when the heart-shaping work was done, whoosh, he came back on the scene in his full glory and power as the leader that God wanted him to be. So leadership is primarily a heart-forming activity of God. So developing the character of Christ in every aspect and learn to live by the power of God's Spirit. The other thing that leadership develops is ministry skills. This is your ministerial formation, learning to do the things that make ministry effective. Did you ever have or serve under a leader who had a strong character, pillar of the community, integrity up and down, but simply was not very skilled? What do you feel with that person? To me, that's one of the hardest people to serve under. Right? Why? What do you feel with that person? Integrity, character, but skills.
You know the thing? You like them for who they are, for their character.
Right.
But they don't add anything to you for your own personal growth as far as the work is concerned.
You like them for their character, but they don't really do anything for you. They don't help you get from here to there. It's frustrating. It's hard to. What do you do with that leader? Right? Everybody loves this leader, but things aren't happening, and people aren't particularly growing, and this thing's not particularly going anywhere. But you don't feel like you can throw that person out because there's this deep respect. And that's one of the hardest situations to deal with. And if you were to either criticize or go somewhere else, you just feel the sense of I'm betraying this person who's such a paragon of virtue. I'm terrible for doing it, but yet you know that you're stuck. So there is a sense that leaders, the character is absolutely key and essential, but there needs to be skills there as well. And then the values and the philosophies. We might refer to this as the strategic formations. When you learn what works through trial and error, when you learn what is the proper approach, what is the proper philosophy to undergird their ministry. Do you want to go in the arts community? All right, that means you're going to have a whole different look and feel to your ministry than if you're going to the yuppies at the country club, or whether you're going to the home. What is your philosophy of ministry, and how do you go about accomplishing that? One of the struggles with the church I'm going to now is they have this young pastor who is he's got the character and he's got some skills. I mean, he's very relational, he communicates well, but he hasn't quite figured out what he's going to do with this whole church thing yet. And everybody's kind of waiting around, and quite frankly, they're getting a little bit impatient because he knows he doesn't want to simply replicate what he saw at his last church because it's a different environment, different context, but yet he hasn't quite figured out the whole philosophy thing yet.
How long has he been there?
He's been there 3 years, his first pastor. And yeah, like I say, people are starting to get impatient because he would cut the guy some slack, but now if that philosophy, because that kind of makes the engine go. If that's not there, the thing kind of gets stuck. So all of these three really are very important. Where do leaders come from? God develops leaders over a lifetime, right? And takes them through seasons and stages. And it begins when and where you were born. God develops leaders through various experiences. This comes out of the Making of a Leader, Clinton's book, where he calls them processes. And we'll look a little bit more at these tomorrow. All things work together for good. The response to the experiences is crucial to the leader's development. And, here's a warning, may hinder or terminate the process of development. Did you ever know somebody that seemed to be tracking for leadership that got derailed and really never got back on the rails again? It breaks your heart to see that, right? All of a sudden it seemed like there was so much potential, but a situation happened, a relationship happened, and the person just responded in a very wrong or negative way, and just at that point the wheels come off. And it's sad, but it does happen. What makes a leader effective? And this is from Clinton studies as well. A lifelong perspective. It provides understanding and encouragement in difficult situations. Right? I am in this for the long haul. This is not a sprint. This is a marathon. And I'm going to hit some hills. I'm going to have to go up a little bit slower. And I'm going to hit some downhills where I'm going to just go running, and it's going to seem easy. But I'm in it for the long haul. To have that lifelong perspective. And a lot of you're coming back to school, in the middle of your ministry saying, I want more. I want to be better. I don't want to get stuck. This is a long haul thing. Right? It's not I have to cram all my education in the beginning and then that's it. You guys are perfect examples of people who have that lifelong perspective. They maintain a learning posture, motivated to learn all they can and not to stagnate. Have you ever met people who are pretty stagnant? They seem to tell you the same stories over and over again. I heard this one again. I can't believe that they didn't realize they just told it to me last week. Or people who tell you about the books they read in the 1960s. Pick up a new one. Let's talk about something. There's just kind of they had their time of education, and that was a long time ago, and they just kind of are done. Those people do not make very good leaders. Generally speaking, leaders are readers, and they keep that learning posture. The leadership selection and development, a primary focus for each leader's ministry. Right? The selection and development of people. They invest heavily in people, and hopefully, most of the time, the right people. Relational empowerment, developing clear, loving, and stimulating relationships with others. I was reading a leadership book the other day, and the guy in it said, I want people to be better after I've been in their life. Yeah. I thought, what a good. What a great desire of a leader. I want people to be better as a result of my influence in their life. Wow. It seems simple, but it kind of hit me. And then I thought, well, are people better after they... and sometimes they are, and sometimes they aren't. There was this one young man who I met him. He was kind of coasting in his Christianity, and we got together for breakfast, and I was able to speak into his life. We started to study some things together, and his life just took off. And he has probably had more spiritual growth in the last 2 years than I have. And he's changed his life. He's quit spoken, he quit drinking, he's running marathons now, he's involved in leading men's ministry, and it was all there. It was just kind of stagnant for a while. And we get together, and he said, I trace it all back to when you invited me to sit down for breakfast. And I think, wow, I'm cool. And then there was the guy who, the pastor said, you really need to start meeting with this guy. He's really sharp. He wants to get involved in the church. He's ready to go. And I met with the guy like 4 times. And then he said, the last time he called me that week, he said, I'm not going to be able to get together with you this week, and I'll give you a call again some other time. And he never called me. And I think, I know that guy 4 times, and I had no influence in that guy's life at all. You know, I'm terrible. So what is it? Am I great or am I terrible? I don't know. But there's a desire that I have that people, that organizations, when I help out my kids' baseball team or with his scouts, I want to know that my involvement is going to make things better and make people better. That's a great thing for a leader to have as a sort of a central motivation. Okay, go on quickly with what makes an effective leader. A sense of destiny. This is a big one. God gives the leader over time a growing sense of purpose and focus to their life. When you have a mature leader, they can tell you what they're about. From their experience, they know their gifting, they know their calling, they know their passion, and they're living it. And those people are great to be around. They have this sense of destiny that I'm living right now. All my experience led up to me being and doing this that I'm doing right now. That's just that sense of convergence they have, and they're just exciting people to be around. They have that sense of destiny over their lives.
Dr. Walter?
Yeah.
Then there would be a position where you come to looking back and saying all of this has brought me to this point as well. So you
say that again. You're looking back and you're saying.
You look back and you say that this group of experiences, last, in my case, 80 years, group of experiences have brought this to this point. So the destiny is being lived out as they're cumulative experiences, and one builds on the previous 2.
Yes.
It's just like
we're talking about these experiences building on each other. It's a growing sense. People in their 30s generally don't have this. They're still having experiences that sometimes feel random. They have this relationship and they're at that church and have this job, and it just doesn't. But then there's a sense, generally when somebody gets later 40s to maybe mid-50s, when suddenly things really seem to come together, and they begin to have sort of leadership positions where they have that sense of, I was created for this. My military background, my business, everything
contributed to
me being right here. And you just kind of feel like the wind is in your sails now, and maybe in a way that you didn't feel that in other periods, stages of your life.
Right. That would be part of your understanding the destiny.
Yeah. That growing sense of purpose and focus. Another one is spiritual authority. God works in a leader's life. God's works in a leader's life is the best basis for godly leadership. Right? They're able to say what God is doing in their life and articulate it and share it in a way that people, wow, they learn and they grow from it and they realize that God is active in this person's life. There's a spiritual authority, right? The kind of spiritual authority that is humble, right? That is not ordering people around, but there's that God is present and active in this leader's life, and that people need to see that, and leaders need to have that to be really effective. And then the philosophy of ministry, our experiences in developing that inner character, the ministry skills, the strategic values. It's interesting to see. Some people are always sort of on the forefront, looking at what's next. Jay Diller just went from being associate pastor at a very big, I would say pretty traditional Baptist church, and now he's mentoring these Acts 29 young emerging generation guys, and he's just able to do that. You know, he just his philosophy and he just is able to do that. Some people have a hard time. He's exceptional in that way. But the philosophy of ministry aspect is a core one for a really effective leader. Okay, we're not going to take time to answer these questions, but here's in past I have, rating yourself 1 to 10 on where would you rate yourself in these leadership ones. This will be your pop quiz tomorrow, by the way. I'll just add up the scores that you write from 1 to 10, and that would be great. All right, I had something else I wanted to get to, but I think I want to launch into the little case study that we have to do tonight. That should be very engaging. So we're going to stick with these.